Happy Thursday afternoon, everybody. Hope you're having a awesome Thursday. Hey, it's Teaching Tips. Teaching Tips are, if you're new to Masterbooks, my name is Randy Pratt. I am the Vice President of Marketing here at New Leaf Publishing Group and Masterbooks. I am the father of 9. We've been homeschooling for over 25 years. And Teaching Tips is some cool things that I've learned on my journey, things I wish I'd known as a father, as a parent. And with all things, with Teaching Tips, doesn't necessarily represent the views and opinions of Masterbooks and New Leaf Publishing Group. And as my wife would say, does not represent her views either in all things. The other thing that I would tell you is to eat the meat and spit out the bones. If there's something I say that's interesting, I would encourage you to research it, go deeper. Let the Holy Spirit be your guide, right? The Holy Spirit always trumps everything I say, for sure, especially when it comes to parenting and your journey as a parent. But there's something that I've been studying lately, and I would say I'm more of a neuro hobbyist. I love the way the brain works. I love the way that God has made us. A lot of coaching and self-help type projects teach, we have a thinking brain and we have a lizard brain, and I just absolutely hate that because it comes down to irreducible complexity, right? The Lord created the brain, and there's parts of the brain that are designed to do what they do and other parts of the brain designed to do what they do. And the thought that we somehow have one layer of a brain and then built newer, more complex layers on top of it, to me is absurd. I think that what we have is a created brain designed to function amazingly as it does. So with that said, what I'm studying and learning about the brain and neurodevelopment is it's kind of shaping. I wish I'd known. It's falling under the I wish I'd known this when my kids were younger category. I think sometimes it's easy to look at our children, especially as they begin to get a little older, and think that they're just mini-me's, that they have all the capabilities and capacity that I do. And so when they're struggling with something, they're just being strong-willed. Like, that was kind of my thinking, if I admit it, right? It's like I didn't give a lot of margin for the fact that they were growing and developing. And so I expected a lot from them sometimes, and I don't think I was as careful as I would be today about we were careful for sure about the input that children had, but being ultra careful to make sure that the programming they're receiving is in line with God's Word and in line with who I desired them to be as adults. So I'd like to say hi to everybody. Sarah Beth, good to see you. Desiree, Caitlin Morris, Julie, Whispering Meadows Academy, Crystal, Missy, Laura, hey Miss Laura, Merlady, is that how? Merlady? Sounds like something from the Knights of the Round Table. Merlady. Stephanie, you're welcome. My hope is that if I can give you something of value that can help save you just a little bit of the pain and suffering maybe that I experienced or my kids experienced as a result, to be able to say that. Serena Slamp, happiest homeschooling. Hey, Angela Thomas, good to see everybody. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Our brain is very complex, right? We have a prefrontal cortex. That is the thinking part of our brain. As adults, that is where our thoughts happen. That's where self-control happens. When we're learning something new, that's the part of the brain that's engaged. Then we have the motor cortex, the part of the brain that is automated. As an adult, if you've ever driven, the first time you drive somewhere, like you're watching, right? If I said, hey, you're going to come to the press and you've never been here before, your brain is on high alert. And so you are, you're working from the prefrontal cortex of your brain is helping you be aware of where we're turning, what's going on. Now, if you're like us who come to work every day here, there are days that I get in my truck and I get to work and I'm like, I don't even remember leaving my driveway. Like, because it's moved from, now it's a habit, now it's into the automation part of my brain. So at first my brain says, hey, this is important, we need to pay attention. Now that part of the brain also burns the most calories. Just like if I am learning a new instrument, or I'm learning, say, try brushing your teeth with the opposite hand tonight. As you begin to feel the challenge of your body having to try to brush, like I'm left-handed, so I don't even think about it. If I switched and I try brushing my teeth with my opposite hand, I can almost feel like the other parts of my brain having to come alive and work to understand, how do I do this without choking myself, right? So that's the part of the brain that is engaged when we're thinking, when we have inhibition control, all of these things, and as things become habit, it moves from the thinking part of the brain into more of the habit brain. And Laura, I wish mine would burn more calories. It does, Laura, even though they're not significant. The brain is trying to preserve calories all the time. And so it moves things from that part that requires a lot more energy into the part that says, okay, this is now a habit. This is the neural pathways have been made for this to happen. Okay. In young children, their prefrontal cortex isn't developed. We're helping them develop the prefrontal cortex. And so they're very vulnerable to the input they receive. This is why, like, I can walk and I don't even think about walking because it's gone through the filters and now it's into the motor part of my brain. But in the prefrontal cortex, I don't even have to think about it, right? So as we get older, our brain continues to develop. The thinking part of our brain begins to develop, and we're able to actually reason. We're able to have more thought capacity. Younger children, when you think about it, if they don't have a developed prefrontal cortex to take the thoughts and understand, what you tell them is what they receive, right? You tell young children, I'm taking your nose. Poof, took your nose. What happens? They believe it because they don't have the reasoning capacity. They don't have the programming and the experience to discern that I can't actually take their nose, that I'm not actually holding their nose. I'd play this with my son for hours. I'd be like, oh, took your nose, and he'd scream and holler, and he'd panic, right? And then I'd give him his nose back, and it'd be good. Why could I do that? Because he didn't have the skill set, the development in his brain to reason that. So think about it. When our kids are watching programs, and we think it may be benign, actually they're receiving that information. Like, that's just programming going in. And so when you think about it, think about, like, everything my kids are receiving right now, especially at a young age, is the programming that they're taking in that is building the foundation that their brain is going to operate from the rest of their lives. This is why we see so many 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds with mommy and daddy issues. Because the information they received when they were young children is what they believe. Like, that's their belief system. It's embedded into the brain. And they don't have the tools to be able to process it differently. So think now, so a young child is receiving information. They want to know, like, they're just gathering all kinds of information. Now the brain is full of all kinds of neural connections. So then as they reach teenager, now again, teenagers aren't mini-me's. And I think we make this mistake. Teenagers are still in the process. Like, why are they moody? Why don't they have self-control? Because all of these things are still developing. Until age 25, the prefrontal cortex is developing until age 25. So when we think about it, it's like, my children are still in this, okay, we're programming. Then about, in teenage years and adolescent years, the brain does synaptic pruning. I know I didn't just say that right. If I try to say it again, it'd be wrong. But it remodels. They call it brain remodeling. where the brain then starts cutting out some of the neural connections that were made that aren't really necessary because there's so many. A teenager begins to actually focus and tighten their focus on the things that matter in their life. And so we program them at a young age, and then we reinforce. If you don't use it, you lose it in your teenage years. And so then we're continuing to reinforce, build those patterns and build those habits, and the brain is doing this remodeling process in the teenage years up to the age of 25. So if you think about it, if a child doesn't have a developed brain, they're receiving everything as truth, and then the brain is still wiring, making connections and firing and building and determining what's important, what's not important. Why in the world would we farm our kids out to somebody else to program our children and then think that we're not going to get the results of the programming that they've received? That's what I think we see in society right now. We're like, how could somebody believe something like this? Because the programming they received, that's the programming they received. So we are the guardians of that. Like if you have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, take seriously that you are the guardian of the thought process and what's being built into them and programming them for life. And even as a teenager, to understand that their brain is going through a remodeling phase and they're developing the skills that they need to move into adulthood. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a little perspective with kids. And again, I'm a hobbyist, so there's more technical terms, I'm sure. And I think it's worth, as a parent, just trying to understand a little bit about how a brain develops, how children grow, and what part we can play in it. So let's say as adults, right? Let's say that some of the programming I received as a child is now affecting me. We can call that a limiting behavior or a limiting belief, that something I received as a child that went in because I accepted it as truth is now built into the automation part of my brain. And I don't question it because it just happened enough and I believe it enough that it's just part of my operating system. So let's say, for instance, let's say beauty, okay? Let's say that as a child, maybe you heard the comment, well, it's a good thing, your sister got you got the brains, your sister got the beauty. So you begin to position that, okay, she's pretty and I'm smart. Or, well, it's a good thing you're smart. These little comments that are received, right, and taken in, and then become part of the automation part of the brain where I just believe, well, I'm smart, but I don't have beauty. But it lowers my self-esteem because society says that it's important, that beauty is important, and so my self-esteem is lower, and I don't believe that I'm made in the image of God and that I'm beautiful the way that God created me. But it's a good thing I'm smart, right? I can even remember hearing my mom's comments about being, I was social, not necessarily smart. And I can remember the report cards being pointed out for being social, but not enjoying academics. And as I've gone through, even as an adult, that programming carried through, that I focused on and was confident in my ability to be aware, to be social, to make connections. But if I was required to do something academic, then that was something that I would shy away from because that's not something I was good at. So let's say I have some belief systems that maybe when I don't even realize it. Like as I'm studying more and more of this, I'm realizing, why don't I believe that I'm good at academics? Like what would be the belief of that? Because I don't necessarily see that in anything. I'm able to actually comprehend some pretty complicated things, but I've accepted that if it's something like math or chemistry, that's not my niche. Yet I have enough intellect to understand some pretty complicated things when it comes to human motivation. So having to try to understand, okay, is this something that is a limiting belief just because I received the programming at an age that I didn't have the capacity to understand what I was receiving. Here's something cool. In the brain, when they actually hook the brain up and they give a thought to somebody, that the thinking part of the brain actually fires first before the automated part of the brain fires. So we know that we can actually take every thought captive, where we've heard that before, that we can take every thought captive is in the Bible, because the thinking part of the brain fires before it passes it to the automated part of the brain, which then responds. So if that happens, if I can kind of identify that there may be a limiting belief here that I'm holding because I received some programming when I was very young, maybe through a teacher, maybe through a sibling or a parent, or I just made some faulty assumptions. So one of the ways, once I identify, like, okay, let's say the beauty aspect. It's a good thing I got brains. My sister got the beauty type thing. Something that we tend to do, it's hard for us to change that belief because it's so built into our programming. Something that I've learned as a trick that I really like to do is to impose that belief on somebody or something that would be absurd. Let's say I walked up to a newborn in a hospital, looked through the window and said, you've got brains. It's a good thing you got brains because every other babies around you are beautiful and you're but ugly. Like, that would be absurd. Everybody around me who heard me saying, you're one of the ugliest babies, I hope you're smart. Your value comes from the fact that you have a brain, not because you're cute, because as a baby you don't have that. No matter what the baby looks like, anybody that heard me would say, that's awful. Right? Like Caitlin, that's awful. Anybody would say that's awful, that you would say that about the baby. Because the baby is adorable. Like, babies are adorable. Their worth doesn't come from whether or not they're cute. Their worth comes from the fact that they're a baby, that their parents love them, that God created them, and they are fearfully and wonderfully made. Like, that's where their worth comes from. So we take a belief that was given to us that became part of our belief system, and we say, this applies to me. Like, my worth comes because of my brains. I'm not attractive. I'm not worth as much because of that. But yet, if I apply the same logic to someone more innocent or someone that I love, like, imagine me coming up to your kids and saying, it's a good thing you're smart because you're pretty ugly. If I said that to one of your kids, like, your mama bear, grizzly bear, gonna come out, right? Like, oh no, you didn't just tell my kid that they're ugly. Like, you wouldn't take that. But yet you would tell yourself that and believe that yourself, as opposed to saying, I'm beautiful because I'm unique in the way God made me, and I have my value from who I am in Him, not from what somebody thinks beauty is or defines beauty. Like, we would all be much more merciful to somebody else that we love than we would be to ourselves. So it's been a really good way for me to catch some limiting beliefs, test that limiting belief on somebody I love, and see if it holds water. And if it doesn't hold water, like if I said to somebody, hey, you actually can't do math. Like, you're not smart enough to do math. If I said that to one of my kids, that's not what I would say to my kids. I would say, you can do it. Even if it's a bit of a struggle, you can do this. You're smart enough to do this. Or we'll find a way to get it done. I wouldn't just accept you're not smart enough to do that. So I can apply that to my own situation and say, well, if I don't believe it for and I can argue that's not truth for them. Now I can actually take that limiting belief and reprocess it so that I'm reprogramming myself, if you will, that every time that thought comes up, I can apply the same arguments that I would to the baby or my child as I would to myself. Hopefully that makes some sense. Play with it a little bit. Test it. Like, there's some limiting beliefs that you have. Somebody programmed you in some ways. There are things that maybe issues that limit you. And when you feel it, try to identify what is that statement or the programming that you received. And then once you've received that programming, argue it so that when it comes up, the thinking part of your brain overrides the non-thinking part of your brain, says, oh, that programming was bad. This is actually brain 2.0. And in brain 2.0, we don't believe that anymore. So with our kids, now let's talk about our kids. Sometimes it's easy to fall into the mindset that our kids are struggling learners, our kids are, and there are challenges that our kids can have. But sometimes there are things that have been said or spoken or beliefs that they have, like school is awful, right? I hate school. Okay, so that belief system that's there becomes a limiting belief, because anytime we come near something that says we don't like school. So if it looks like school, my brain says, oh, here's the connection I have. It's school. I hate it. And we can reframe that by going to, it's not that I hate school, I really like learning. So maybe I didn't like the structure of school and that, but I can reframe that so that if it looks like learning is fun. Learning has value. Learning will take me places. Learning will help me connect with people. So now when my brain sees something that looks like learning, I run it through a new program and say, I want to learn. I love to learn because learning brings value to my life. Where before school, maybe I hated school, I can love learning. And school equals learning. So I can even take it further. When I hear that I'm going to do school, I don't have to be like, ugh. I can be like, school is learning. School isn't bullying. School isn't, having to sit and be punished and deal with all of that. School is learning. And so I can begin to take those experiences and reshape them a little bit once I can identify them. So that's where I think if I had it to do over again, being a little bit more aware that my children were not mini-me's, that they were in development, that they were in the programming phase, very vulnerable. The younger they are, the more vulnerable they were, and that as they age, they're not just becoming more mature mini-me's, but that they're actually in the process of refining who they are as people. And then at age 20, we begin to actually see that adult. But showing a little bit more grace also for the programming phase and the remodeling phase of my children's life. So, all right, well, I hope that was helpful or gave you some food for thought and some things to take away. So, let's see, S. Wheeler, I heard I'm just not athletic, so I never went out for sports. As an adult, I'm a runner who wishes I would have taken track. Yeah, I mean, people do that all the time, right? They will make a statement, and because we're not trained, like now you're a runner, and so you know that. And if I said, well, you're not very athletic, you'd be like, yeah, well, look at you, Pudge. Like you would reason that out now because you know that you are athletic, and you know that the definition of an athlete, right? Like some people throw a shot put but can't run a sprint. That doesn't make them less of an athlete. And so you can actually reason around that much different. Laura, thank you for the good reminders. Thank you, Laura, for listening. All right, guys. Hey, well, it was a privilege to be part of your day. I appreciate that very much. I hope this was helpful. And anytime, if there are teaching tips or things that you think would be handy, don't be afraid to post in the app and let us know. This would be a teaching tip I would enjoy getting some input on. I love to answer those type of questions as well. And pray you have a good weekend, and we will talk to you all later.